Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. I have the all-new Mercedes-Benz EQS, and this is one of the flagship models for all-electric models from Mercedes. So it ought to be a really good quality from outside to inside, but I'm going to let you know by doing my usual engineer's audit, checking for the quality of the panel fit and alignment, as well as the paint job and also the interior, and then also give you an impression of what I think of the driving character of this EQS. So let's go and find out the quality of this all-new EQS. Let's go. Welcome back. So let's take a look at the build quality of this Mercedes-Benz EQS, which is one of their flagship EVs. It's a fully electric model, not an ICE, internal combustion engine models. So obviously the way I might measure quality and so forth might change a little bit. But for the most part, I'm going to use the same method by using my gauge for the panel gaps and alignment, and also use my paint thickness gauge to measure the total amount of paint applied to the car. But first and foremost is the actual gaps. Before I go too far, I just want to remind you that for whatever reasons, Mercedes-Benz have decided not to let you open the hood of this EQS. So you can't actually pop this up, only the dealership can. And therefore, even to top up your windshield washer, you have to actually open this little thing here and top it up from here. This is an example of a bit of an over-engineering from my perspective to create this whole thing. Just to be able to put the windshield washer, I think is a bit unusual. But regardless, let's take a look at the gap. So we have this one big piece, which is kind of clamshell design. And this whole thing tends to kind of overlap a little bit with the front fender, which is a small piece here. So the gap is actually a bit odd because it's almost 4 millimeters here. But more than that, this thing kind of goes over the fender here. So it actually goes over a little bit. And that might be by design, but it is a bit unusual from my perspective. But the rest of the panels looks okay. This is actually a good alignment here. This is also about 4 millimeters though. And then you come over here and it's also about 4, maybe 3.9. And back here is a bit better at 3.5. But the actual alignment of the rest of the panels looks really good. It looks like a one single sheet of metal. Although I will still say that if I compare it to something like a Lexus, it's not quite the same level of alignment, because I can see a bit of a wave in the sheet metal as we go from panel to panel. Although I will say that the paint job is really good. So if I were to look at it from all the way back here, it looks just fine from a distance, but if I look really carefully as a manufacturing engineer, then I can see a little bit in the waves throughout the sheet metal here. So I think it's something they'll have to improve over time, because this is an all-new model and they're probably still working to make the panels as perfect as possible. But the paint job looks good. It has a very beautiful finish to it. It's got a deep color, and the pigmentation is also excellent. And the gloss and the clear coat is really good. Typically speaking, European cars, especially German cars from Mercedes, have a bit of a thicker paint, so I'll find out shortly when I measure the thickness. And then also the orange peel has a very different texture from Japanese models. The European models have a bigger orange peel, so the textures look less pixelated, if you know what I mean. Now let's measure the paint thickness, see what happens. So now I have the paint thickness gauge to measure the total amount of paint that's applied on top of the sheet metal. That includes all the layers of paint and the clear coat and the undercoat. And usually you want it to be between 100 to 180 microns. Typically for Toyota or Lexus, it's around 100 to 125. But I find that the European models are thicker because they apply more paint. So let's see what happens with this EQS. 157 right here and on the hood and the door. 172, and by the way, these are all aluminum panels. 165, and finally over here 177. So sure enough, it's quite a bit thicker than most Japanese brands, because I think even the most expensive Lexus with additional clear coat is around 125 to 30 microns, but this one is ranging from 150 to 100, almost 80 here. So 30 to 40% thicker than most of the other Japanese brands, and that's actually a good thing. I prefer that the paint is thicker than thinner, just because it's Durable, and if you have to polish out any scratches in the future, you don't have to worry too much about losing the paint as you polish the paint for repair work. I love this bluish color. I'm not sure what it's called, but it kind of looks like an ocean blue, and because the blue color is in right now as a trend, I see more and more manufacturers put different spin on the bluish color. Now let's take a look at the inside to see what the quality of manufacturing is and to give you some general impression of the interior design. So now I'm inside the Mercedes-Benz EQS, and as you can tell, this is the highlight of this car with an impressive array of displays. Everything is digital display. You got instrumentation, which is digital. You got a huge center piece here, and then another screen for the passenger that allow you to manage temperatures and make some adjustment to radio and so forth. The whole thing looks so impressive that actually when I'm driving at night, it's almost distracting because it's so bright and so vivid that as I'm driving, you can't help but take your eyes off sometimes to look at what's going on the screen. So I think it's a beautiful screen and obviously designed to impress the passengers. But I think for the driver, this is a bit of an overkill for me in terms of an engineering perspective because I like things a little bit simple. But regardless of that, what about in terms of quality? Well, everything is made from super high quality materials, including suede type materials and full of leather, and nothing is loose. Everything is pretty tight. I heard no squeaks or rattles when I'm driving, and this thing is so quiet on the road. Honestly, you literally feel like this thing is floating in air. But in terms of the build quality, the fit and finish, I think the interior is really well done. Better than the exterior because there's a few things I pointed out on the outside. But here, the material selection, the stitching, the way that all the parts come together is very impressive. And this vehicle certainly makes you feel like you're very special just because of the design. I like this, this bronze color that's highlighted across the interior, as well as a matching stitching. And then this wood panel, which are very subtle and not too much in your face. So if you like a gorgeous, beautiful interior, you're going to fall in love with the EQS. And if you love to be a passenger versus a driver, you're also going to love the EQS because it is just so quiet and comfortable. But in terms of an engineering perspective, what I do miss is that there are no buttons. Everything is on the digital here, and even though the screen is big and actually quite user-friendly, it requires me to interact everything through the screen, which is something I'm not too crazy about. I can manage some of those functions through my steering, but even the steering has a bit of a kind of tactile feel that is not all that natural. And unfortunately, to do everything through the screen, it requires you to take your eyes off the road. So I think this is a trend for all the EV models, but I wish that Mercedes-Benz would have placed some of the basic functionality through the buttons. By the way, because this is a crossover type vehicle versus sedan, I definitely prefer this style of EV because it's much more practical in terms of amount of space you get both in the front and the back, and the trunk space is enormous. So it is a big car with a lot of space. So if you're looking for beautiful EV with lots of room to stretch out, well, the EQS will definitely fit your bill. So now I'm driving the EQS, and believe me, if we had a time machine and we were able to ship this car back 50 years ago, and we told the people that this thing is actually a flying machine and is floating in the air, they'll believe you because honestly, you can't feel anything on the road. This thing glides over roads, even rough roads, as if there's nothing underneath. It's absolutely comfortable and it's very, very smooth and refined to the point where it's a bit boring for me because I like to drive a car with a bit of a substance and character. But if you need to carry passengers, say, or you need to go for a long drive, well, there's nothing more beautiful than this one. This is your ultimate, most luxurious electric vehicle to drive around both in city and on the highway, and just because it is so quiet and refined. Now, I will say it is actually quite stable because most electric cars have their weight lower in the body, so center of gravity is very low, which provides stability when you make turns and so forth. And the steering input is actually quite good because it's accurate, but it is not a fun car to drive. I cannot say that this is fun, other than the acceleration is immense. Once again, because of the EV design, you step on the accelerator and the thing takes off like crazy. It has more than 500 horsepower and more than 500 kilometers of range. So impressive numbers for sure. And it is just a very comfortable vehicle to drive. and it is a predictable handling, it is quite balanced, and it tracks well. But if you're looking for something that will give you a good feedback from the road and something that is fun to drive and give you driving pleasure, I wouldn't pick the EQS because it is definitely not designed for that purpose. Like I said before, I think the instrumentation and the infotainment system is very impressive, but it is a bit distracting and almost impossible to make adjustment on the fly when you're driving, because you have to really look into the screen and try to touch the right spot, because the screen requires some precision when you're trying to make adjustment or to turn something on or off. So that would be my major complaint. But otherwise, it's a very impressive entry from Mercedes-Benz, and I think it's definitely a better vehicle than something like a Tesla Model X, which suffers from quality issues and many other challenges, whereas this one is coming from proven manufacturers, Mercedes-Benz, with a high quality and high technology that should please even the most discriminating buyer out there. If you love Mercedes-Benz for its character and branding and for its luxury features, but you always wanted an electric car, this is probably your best bet. So I hope you enjoyed my review of the Mercedes-Benz EQS. I would appreciate it if you can give me a thumbs up and make some comments. And if you haven't done so, would you kindly subscribe? But until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.